Well, thank you very much. When I finished medical school, I went into emergency medicine, and as you can imagine, I was up many, many nights. And in 1988, I thought, boy, I'd just like to have some regularity. And I'd gone to school at Newbold College, and I thought it'd be fun to go back to England. And I heard about this course in tropical medicine. And I wasn't a bit interested in tropical medicine, but I thought, well, you know, something to keep me off the streets, and I'll just, you know, nice way to be in England. Well, I took this course, and it ended up being the most interesting thing I've ever done in my life. And I remember there's several things that I learned. One thing I remember was one day I was in the cafeteria, and several of my classmates, everybody in the class was a physician, and several of my classmates were looking for opportunities to work overseas. And it was difficult. They were having a difficult time finding places to work. And they found out I was a Seventh-day Adventist, and they said, oh, you're so lucky. Adventists have hospitals all over the world. And I'd never seen it that way. I always thought it was kind of our burden or our responsibility. But they saw this as a great privilege and opportunity to be able to serve overseas. One thing that I remember, and the other thing that was interesting to me is, whether we realize it or not, the profit motive is so strong in this country. We're always thinking, how can we do less and make more? But at the School of Tropical Medicine, people were always wrestling with issues of how can we do more with the limited funds that we have. And it was very clean talk. And I remember one day, it was the end, the course was very intense. It started early in the morning and go till about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. And one day there was an amphitheater. It was like this, except it was really high. And way down at the bottom, there were 5 people that were going to make a presentation. And as I looked at him, I was really sleepy. I could hardly keep my eyes open. And the 5th person, he looked like the most boring person I'd ever seen. He just sat there, motionless. He looked old and tired and irrelevant. And I thought to myself, when he gets up to talk, that'll be an easy time for me to leave. And so when he came time for him to speak, he stood up, and I swore the room just was like it was hit by a bolt of lightning. He is probably one of the most interesting people I've ever heard in my life. His name was Professor David Morley, and you see his picture here. Have any of you heard of David Morley? Actually, he's quite famous, but I'd never heard of him before. And he had spent all of his life just trying to find simple ways to help people, and he worked primarily in West Africa. And he left such an impression on me that day. And in 2011, I thought to myself, I should try to contact that man and tell him, you know, how much I appreciated that day. So I went to the internet and I looked him up, and sadly, he had died in 2009. But his obituary said that he, along with another man by the name of James Grant. Have you ever heard of James Grant? Never heard of James Grant. Well, I'd never heard of James Grant until last week when I started putting this together. Between the two of them, it said that they probably saved more lives than were destroyed by Hitler, Mao, and Stalin. Can you imagine that? 2 men, and we never even heard of them. Here they are, David Morley and James Grant. James Grant, it was interesting, he was actually the executive director of UNICEF from 1980 to 1995. He was born of missionary parents in China, and his big contribution was immunization, massive immunization throughout Asia and Africa. And then, of course, David Morley was the one behind oral rehydration therapy. But can you imagine, those 2 men saved more lives than these 3 men destroyed, yet we never even heard of them. David Morley was nominated for a Nobel Prize, but he didn't actually receive a Nobel Prize. Anyway, several years ago, a friend of mine and I he lives in Minnesota, we started this organization called Tropical Health Alliance Foundation. And we decided that we would focus on projects that are SPUD. That means simple, practical, understandable, and doable. So no high-tech stuff, just simple, practical, understandable, and doable. And projects that have what we call a high LPI index. That means, we just made this stuff up. If you're in public health or something, you've never heard of this before. But it stands for lives positively impacted. So before we get involved in anything, we say, is it simple? Is it practical? Is it understandable? Is it doable? Is it quantifiable? Is it easy? And does it positively impact a lot of lives? To make a long story short, I won't get into this, but we started working in Ethiopia. And Anywhere you go in Ethiopia, and some of you have been in Ethiopia, you see so many blind people. It turns out that Ethiopia has one of the highest numbers of blind people per capita of any country in the world. In fact, quite a while ago I read on the Carter Center that it does have the highest. About 1.6% of the population is blind. And everywhere you go, you see people like this, children like this, these two little girls, blind, people that are severely visually impaired. This is a group of boys that are blind. These two little girls are blind. And it's very common to see people, two people that are blind leading each other around. One of them may have a little vision, so they'll lead the other person. And it's very common with young kids. If one of them has a little bit of sight, they'll lock arms, and that one with a little bit of vision will lead the other ones around. And then the saddest thing is that so many times, instead of having seeing eye dogs like we have in this country, in Ethiopia, they have seeing eye children. And this is a little girl. I mean, just look at her. She doesn't have any life in her eyes. And she leads around this blind man. But this is the one that really, really, I saw so much of this, and I kind of got used to it. And this picture here was kind of an epiphany for me, because this little boy was leading his mother around. And I distinctly remember all of a sudden a bunch of children went running by him that were about his age. And instead of being able to run and play, he had to lead this mother around. And it was really sad. It kind of sunk in. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be wonderful? And when you look at these people, so many of them, I mean, it's obvious they have cataracts. And so I thought to myself, wouldn't it be interesting if we could start a cataract program? And lo and behold, in this area, there was a Dutch priest by the name of Father Filippo many years ago who started a clinic, and he went back to Holland, and he took a course, kind of barefoot doctor's ophthalmology type of course. He wasn't an ophthalmologist, he wasn't even a doctor, but he learned how to treat common eye diseases, and he started this clinic. And then sadly, he died. He died of lung cancer. And the clinic was taken over by the Daughters of Charity, and they kind of limped along, and they did what they could, but it wasn't really thriving. And so one day I was talking to one of the Catholic sisters, and I said, just kind of offhandedly, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could start a cataract program? And she said, yeah, that'd be great. And so this picture was taken May of 2007. So I tried, I talked to ophthalmologists and everything I could, and I was just a failure. Nothing happened. And then I remember I was working in the ER in 2010, and the secretary said, there's a doctor on the line that wants to talk to you. And so I said, okay. And he introduced himself, and it's Dr. James Guzik, who used to be chairman of the ophthalmology department at the VA hospital here across town. And he said, I hear that you're looking for an ophthalmologist to work in Ethiopia. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'd be interested in going over. And you know how some people you just kind of click with? We just clicked. He just was very quick, and he just did what he said he was going to do. And he put together the equipment, and he went over, and the first trip he did about 100 cataracts. And he got kind of addicted, as I think I am with Ethiopia, and he kept going over. And he thought to himself, what are we going to do if I leave and there's a complication? So we scouted around, and we found that there was only one other ophthalmologist in that whole area covering about 3 million people. And so we're working at this Catholic clinic, and there's a sister there by the name of Sister Evelyn. I call her Our Lady of Perpetual Motion. She's just constantly working, moving, getting things done. And she called this ophthalmologist and asked him to come, and he said he was too busy. And so the next time Dr. Guzik went out, she called the ophthalmologist and asked him if he could come, and he said he was too busy. This ophthalmologist told me this story later. And the third time, she called him. His name is Dr. Samuel, and she said, on such and such a day, at such and such a time, I'm sending a vehicle. Please be ready, and we'll bring you here. And so he said, what can I do? So he showed up. And boy, that was a match made in heaven. He's just a wonderful man. He's a Mechanic Jesus, which is Evangelical Lutheran. And we all started working together. And we realized that if we were going to really be serious about this, this idea of sending teams out, it's good, but it's expensive. And, what do? You do 100 cataracts. So we started contracting with Dr. Samuel, every 4 to 6 weeks, we would hire him to do a week of surgery, and he could do about 300 cataracts a week, and so we're really doing quite well. And Sister Evelyn had this all organized for us. And then back in June of 2012, the whole thing just fell apart. According to the rules of her religious order, she could only work 3 3-year terms in one area, and her 9 years were up and she had to leave. And Dr. Samuel, who's a very, very good ophthalmologist, was offered a teaching position at the medical school. So in June of 2012, I went over there. I was kind of discouraged because, it was over with. And I talked to Sister Evelyn and told her, it's not possible. We can't do this without you. And so she said, talk to my provincial superior, and I'd really like to stay, and if she'll let me stay, I'd really like to stay on. So I went to Addis, and I talked with her provincial superior, and she said, no, she's got to step down because her term is up. But she says, if you can make this eye project work, she said, you can have her for yourself just for this, for the project. Now, those of you who know me, I've never even been married, so I've not had a wife. Now I have a nun. And that's quite a challenge. Then I went to Dr. Samuel and made a proposal asking if he would work for us full time. And he said, well, let me give it a little thought. And a few days later, to my complete surprise, he said that he just had no peace with this decision to go to the medical school, and that he really wanted to serve his people. And so he gave up his position at the medical school, and now we have a full-time ophthalmologist, and we have a sister just designated for our project. So did a little looking into blindness into Africa. It's interesting. On the continent of Africa, there's one ophthalmologist for an average of 1.25 million people. Just to put that into perspective, we have, I think, about 2.2 million people in San Bernardino County. So if this were Africa, there'd be just about 2 ophthalmologists for the whole county. I called the San Bernardino County Medical Society earlier this week, and we have 123 ophthalmologists in this county. The area that we serve has about 3 million people, and the only ophthalmologist is Dr. Samuel. Here's Dr. Samuel operating. Here he is again. I don't have any pictures just of Sister Evelyn because she's always moving and I can't really get pictures of her. This is a little poster that we spread around. Of course, a lot of the people can't read, so it's got to be very visual. So we put the location and the dates that we're going to be there, and Evelyn goes around and posts these all over. I'd like to tell you 4 stories today. The first story is about this lady, the lady at the very end. You see that she has a goiter? This is a lady that was brought to the clinic by her daughter and her son-in-law, and accompanied by 2 grandchildren. And this lady, Thaddeus, do you remember how long she'd been blind? No. Well, she had been blind for quite some time. I don't think she had ever seen her grandchildren. She'd held her grandchildren, she'd taken care of her grandchildren as best she could, but I don't think she'd ever seen them. Anyway, she had bilateral cataracts, perfect candidate for surgery. Did surgery on her, and the next day, just the next day, this is the thing that's so fun about it, the very next day you get such good results. And here she is with her daughter, her 2 grandchildren, and there's a lot in this picture. There's the reason why you do cataracts is not so much to restore vision of the blind person. The real reason you do cataracts is because you liberate a child. So many times these children that go around leading these people, there's particularly their girl. This is really kind of a gender issue because there's 1.8 times more women with blindness than men, and the women are the most productive members of society. And the little girls are often the ones that lead these blind people around. So when you look at this picture, what this means is this little girl who she's holding in her arm, this little girl up here, they're not going to have to lead their grandmother around. 78% of the population of Ethiopia live on less than $2 a day. So when somebody's blind and they're not productive, it's a terrible burden on the family. And it takes, like they say, blindness makes people families extremely poor. So just by a simple $50, 10-minute surgery, you can do massive things for the family dynamics here. Look, here she is again with this daughter. This little granddaughter is not going to have to lead her grandmother around when she gets older. And it's amazing. This was such, remember, Thaddeus here was with me. They were just such kind, gentle people. And they were so appreciative. And it seemed like even this little baby realized something good was going on. It's just that baby is so beautiful. Look at that. Anyway, I like this project. There's a book written not long ago called Toxic Charity. And they made a point that it's very difficult to give money well, because what you do so many times, it says toxic charity, how churches and charities hurt those they help and how to reverse it. And what happens, so much of our giving actually creates dependency. And the author here, Robert Lupton, he made the point that the first time you help somebody, they appreciate it. The second time, they begin to anticipate it. The third time, they begin to expect it. The fourth time, they feel entitled. And the fifth time, you've actually created dependency. And you've all seen that. The thing about this eye project is you take them in, you do the cataract surgery, they appreciate it, and you go from dependency to independency overnight. We're going to just kind of go make a sidetrack here. Remember how we were talking about projects that are simple, practical, understandable, and doable? Did you see how that grandmother had a goiter? As you're driving down the streets out in the countryside, you can be going 30 miles an hour. It doesn't take the brains of Britain. You can just say, you just see people all over with these goiters. Of course, this is a pretty dramatic one. But look at that. Here's other women with these. It's more common in women. Look at that. I just had to throw this in because this is a very simple, practical, understandable, easy to do. All they need is iodized salt. That's all they need, just iodized salt. And there's a Dutch group that distributes iodized salt. But that's simple, it's practical, it's understandable and doable, and it positively impacts a lot of lives. And it doesn't cost very much. This is a really interesting story. Maybe, Thaddeus, you'd like to tell this story. Do you want to tell this story? Yeah. Thaddeus is Ethiopian. He's a filmmaker, and we just got back from Ethiopia. And Thaddeus is going to be making a film about this man. This is a man, it's just an incredible story. This man, he was a soldier, and he had a lot of damage done to his feet. So some of his toes are missing, and there's a lot of scarring of his feet, so it's hard for him to walk. He's missing a lot of his teeth, and he's blind. He'd been blind for several years. His wife was dead. His 2 sons were dead. His daughter lived in the northern part of the country, and so he wasn't able to see her. The only thing he could do was beg, and he was ashamed to beg, so he moved from his small village to a larger town called Jimma. And in Jimma, he would beg, and if you can believe it, people would rob him. They'd rob a blind man. And finally, he decided he was going to commit suicide. So he had his military belt, and he decided that he was going, and he offered this. We didn't tease this out of him. He told us about this. He decided he was going to hang himself from a tree, but he couldn't work it out. He couldn't get up in the tree, and he couldn't hang himself. So that option was out. Then he decided that he was going to drown himself, but he couldn't find a place to drown himself. So as a last resort, he decided he was going to jump in front of a vehicle. So he jumped in front of a vehicle, and the vehicle swerved and missed him. So at that point, he thought, he's just going to accept whatever life gave him and just suffer through it. And then somehow or another, for reasons that I'm not real clear on, I don't know if you remember, but he found out about the eye project in Dembidolo. And so he struck out to get to this clinic. Now, here's the map of Ethiopia. And you see here, this is where he was living, this is where we're at. I Google mapped this. This is over 320 miles. And this is a blind man. I mean, if I had to walk from here to the medical center, it would be overwhelming, blind. He's blind. He went over 320 miles. It took him several days. He had to beg. He had to try to get the money to occasionally get a bus. It took him several days to get to Dembidolo, but he finally got there. Here you see him. His feet are all torn up. Here he is. He had just had a nerve block. He's getting ready to have cataract surgery. He's a perfect case. He had bilateral dense cataracts. Here he is having surgery. The next day, the eye patch was removed, and he could see. The following day, they did the second eye, and the following day, he had 2 good eyes. And here he is. And actually, Thaddeus is a filmmaker. This clinic, it's interesting because I'd never built a clinic for the blind with stairs, but they did. And so we built a ramp. And so people, when they're blind, they go up that ramp. And just to prove that he could see, he comes out now and he just bang, bang, bang. He just goes down those steps. And here he is. You can see. Do you remember when when the patches were taken off, he looked at his cane and he kissed his cane. He says, "My best friend." And here he is with Sister Evelyn on the left, Dr. Samuel on the right, and I think his name was Abdullah, something like that. And there he is. What is it? Abdullah? Yeah. A great quote. Sister Evelyn is of course Catholic. Dr. Samuel is Evangelical Lutheran, and Abdullah is Muslim. And here's a great quote that I always like from John Newton. It says, "When a house is on fire, churchmen, dissenters, Methodists, Papists, Moravians, mystics, all are welcome to bring water." Another quick quote here is, "If you want something said, you ask a man. If you want something done, you ask a woman." And it's the case in point. Like right now, I'm talking, and at 8 o'clock, which will be 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, Sister Evelyn will be starting an eye clinic. So I'm talking, she's working. Here's that cane that his best friend. And of course, we couldn't have had a better advertisement. He was a real storyteller. And he sat around for the next few days just talking to people about his experience. You couldn't have had a better advertisement than him. And here he is. Sister Evelyn was telling me that he was praising God, but he wasn't using the Muslims refer to God as Allah. He was, what was the Zabir? He was using the Christian term for God. And these glasses in that hat, that's kind of interesting. Somebody told him that had known him when he was blind. He said, "I don't believe you can see." And he said, "I can see." And he says, "Well, I'm going to put some paper money, quite a bit of paper money. It was about equivalent to about $5 on the ground." And he said, "If you can walk over and pick it up, I'll believe it. Otherwise, I don't believe you can see." So he just walked right over and he picked up the money. And with that money, he bought those sunglasses and that hat. And that the sunglasses were not to protect his eyes from sun. The sunglasses were to protect his eyes. He just didn't want anybody or anything getting anywhere and messing with his eyes. And then the hat, I think he just thought he looked good. I don't know. This is another story. This is another reason, of course, why we do cataract surgery is to liberate a child. This is a little girl named Senna and her grandfather. And we have a film of this little girl.
Meet Sena. She is your typical 7-year-old. Shy, intelligent, and overflowing with the innocence of youth. There is nothing physically or mentally wrong with her. She is normal, except for one dark handicap. Her grandfather. Each year, hundreds of people trek along dirt paths and through the dense jungle to a small village in western Ethiopia, Dimbidolo. Men and women, young and old, Orthodox, Muslims, Catholics, and Protestants all make the journey. Some come from the nearby village of Tabor, others come from as far away as Sudan. They all share one thing in common. They are blind. The eye clinic in Dimbidolo was founded by a Dutch priest, Father Filippo, and upon his death, the work continues through the collaborative efforts of the Daughters of Charity, Tropical Health Alliance Foundation, Rotary International, and scores of individual sponsors. Each year, a group of volunteers travel around the world to Dimbidolo, providing cataract surgery to hundreds of patients in need of sight. This service is desperately necessary in the poverty-stricken countryside of Ethiopia. Here, the long journey to the capital city of Addis Ababa is impossible. This year, Dr. James Guzik has brought a team of cataract specialists to Dimbidolo from the Pacific Cataract and Laser Institute. PCLI is a renowned organization based in the Pacific Northwest, boasting top-notch doctors with access to the latest techniques and equipment used to perform cataract surgery. Each member of the team has taken time away from their lucrative careers at the Institute to bring sight to the people living in Ethiopia. The team has set up shop in Father Filippo's aging clinic. In just a few hours, they have converted the bare rooms into a modern eye clinic, complete with a fully functional operating room. The selection process for patients is rigorous and handled with care and precision. Only those with bilateral blindness are accepted, and only one eye is repaired. This is done to ensure that the maximum number of people are treated during the team's short 2-week stay. Amongst this year's blind pilgrims to Dimbidolo is Sena and her grandfather. Sena has led her grandfather from their village many miles away, never leaving his side or letting go of his hand. In Ethiopia, it is common for a blind adult to take a child, usually around Sena's age, as a guide, similar to a seeing eye dog. Sena is tied to her grandfather's hand. Wherever he goes, she goes. She must be by his side day and night, accompanying his every move. Sena can't go to school, she can't be with her friends, she can't work. Her life is her grandfather. Sena waits patiently outside as her grandfather goes through the screening process, hoping their long journey has not been in vain. After hours of waiting, the test results return. Her grandfather is a candidate for surgery. Sena stands by her grandfather's side, clutching his hand as the first incisions are made. She knows nothing else. The operation continues smoothly, although time seems to drag on. As the final suture is completed, there are storm clouds on the horizon. And with the application of the eye patch comes a firm reminder to keep the wound dry. As they leave for the night, it begins to rain. It is a new day in Dimbidolo. The leaves drip with moisture from last night's rain. There is new life, a sign of a fresh start. It's early, but Dr. Guzik is already hard at work. He leaves the clinic only for a few hours of sleep, refusing to trade rest for another person's vision. Sena and her grandfather arrive at the clinic early, eager to discover the results of yesterday's operation.
We're going to take off a sketch and take a look and see what we have here.
Sena's grandfather sees only darkness, and then a blinding light. Finally, his eyes come into focus on a sight he has never seen before. Sena. Sena is overwhelmed. Now she has the freedom to return to school and the freedom to make new friends. She has regained her childhood. She has the freedom to let go of her grandfather's hand. One surgery has saved 2 lives.
We got a lot of donations to come out, but there's still a lot of stuff to be done. And so it's not possible for me or Larry to do this by her, or sister to do this by herself. We need some help.
As Dr. Guzik's stay draws to a close, the clinic's courtyard remains filled with those waiting to be seen. These people will return home in disappointment, praying the eye team will be able to return next year. There are already plans to establish a permanent eye clinic in Dimbidolo, but this is costly. Medical equipment must be purchased and imported, local staff must be trained, and a permanent team of competent personnel must be on hand to manage and run the clinic. This goal is only achievable through the support of people around the world. To find out how you can contribute to the Visually Impaired Persons Program, and for more information, visit www.thaf.org.
Just this afternoon, I got an email. Dr. Guzik and Dr. Samuel are both operating. They're doing what's called a mega clinic. They hope to do 500 cataracts in 1 week. And yesterday they did a cataract. There's something called congenital cataracts that some children are born with. And the problem with congenital cataracts is if they go long enough, then that part of the brain just switches off. So even if you put in a lens, that part of the brain is gone. So you have to get it to them fairly early, I think before the age of, I don't know if there's any ophthalmologists here, but I think, 7, 8, something like that. Anyway, yesterday they did cataract surgery on an 8-month-old baby with congenital cataracts. So that baby will see. So. Anyway, I always say there's 3 reasons. I always said there were 3 reasons to do cataract surgery. 1, the most important, is to liberate a child. 2 is to remove an extreme economic hardship from a family. 3 is just kind of a bonus to restore vision to a person. But there's a 4th reason. I just found that out. You see this man here? I didn't take that picture. I wasn't there when this happened. I was told about this. Somebody else took the picture. But this guy came in and he was, pretty young, and he had bilateral cataracts. And so they did just one eye. There were so many people that, you'd rather have 100 people with one eye than 50 with 2. So the next time the team came out, he just begged to have the other eye operated on, so they did. And the next day, he came back, and he was going up to all of the women, and he was saying something to them that was making them kind of blush and then making them kind of laugh, and they were kind of embarrassed, and he'd just go, all to these women, he was saying these things. And so the team, they asked the translator, what is he saying? And apparently the translator was laughing so hard that he could hardly tell him, but what he's doing, he's going up to the women, and he was saying, your beauty is no longer wasted on a blind man. So anyway, there's a 4th reason to do cataracts. Beauty no longer wasted. Last year was our first year of doing full-time cataract surgery, and we did 2,806. This year, we hope to do 5,000. We hope by the year 2020 that we will have done 20,000, and I think it's going to be quite easy to achieve that goal. And they're hoping ultimately that we can ramp up to where we're doing 10,000 cataract surgeries a year. Right now, we just have 1 ophthalmologist there, and then, of course, Dr. Guzik, who goes over periodically. But they have a program in Ethiopia. Sadly, they just discontinued it. But a nurse can take a 3-year course and train to become an ophthalmic surgeon. They're not an ophthalmologist, but they're called an ophthalmic surgeon, and they can do cataracts. And we have one that's just completing the course and another one that just completed a course. And so then we'll have 2 more people that can do cataract surgery. We'll have 3. And we should easily be able to do 10,000 a year. The last video, and then I think that's it.
My name is Samuel Bora. I am an eye doctor. In the last 7 days, we operated on 241 cataract surgeries. As we have seen last week, most of the patients are poor. They cannot afford to pay. They are also physically weak. So the need for surgical eye camp is really tremendous.
እኔ ጋሻው መለሰ ባላለሁኝ አባቴ መለሰ ነው። ያው እሱ ካመመው የአይን ህመም ጀመረ። ያው 6 ዓመት ነው። 6 ዓመት ነው። ከ6 ዓመት ጀምሮ ግን እስካሁን ድረስ የአይን ብርሃን በማጣት በጣም እያዘንኩ እየተቆረቆረ ነው። ግን አሁን በዛሬው በትላንትናው ዕለት አንዲቱ የአይን ብርሃን በመገኘቷ በጣም ሁለተኛ እንደተወለደ ነው የቆጠረው። በጣም ነው ደስ ያለኝ።
ጨለማው ሆነ ሲገለጥልኝ ደስታ ወደ ደስታ ብላለ ያው ደስታ ይሄ ነው። ሌላ ምንም የለም።
يلا كيسا مقارا يتكل انتو مسترتاي يلا كيسا مقار يتكلنتو مسترتاي
አጋሮቼ አየኋችሁ አየኋችሁ። ይሄ ሁላ ተቀምጦ ለእናንተ ማፍሰስ ይህን ደስታ ተቀምጦ ይህማ መናገር አቃተኝ። ይኸው ተመልከቱ፣ ወለዳችሁ ለልጅ ለአንዱ ቅና ልጅ እንደገና ወለዳችሁ። ደስታ ይሄ ነው። እናና በስ ምሳሌ
You are the treasure of my soul.